Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I want to welcome Dr. Amy Shah. She is a board certified allergist and immunologist. She practices in Scottsdale, Arizona, and she also does wellness consults around the globe. And so really, really happy to have you here today. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Saya.
Anytime. So, before we get into our topic, I just wanted to sort of ask you, so our viewers also know, what got you into allergy immunology? And then after that, I know you've significantly transitioned your practice. I know you still do allergy immunology, but I know you've added a lot to your practice. So could you just tell us a little bit about how you got into your career and the transitions that you've made?
Yeah, happy to share. I started out as a nutrition obsessed young person, and I knew that nutrition was going to be a huge part of my life. Actually, I was out with one of my friends, and he said to me, there's a world renowned nutrition program at Cornell. You should apply. And I was like, wait, that could be a major. Like, I didn't even think that, because that was my true passion. Like, when you do the deep soul searching. So I applied, got started with the nutrition program at Cornell, and I knew that medicine and nutrition was something I wanted to do. So I kind of did my own little major within the nutrition school. That was human biology, health, and society. Went to med school, and I realized that I wanted to do internal medicine. So after medical school, I started to do a residency in general internal medicine, which for people who aren't in medicine just means a general physician, because I thought that was the best way to kind of combine my nutrition knowledge and medical knowledge. When I was in medical school, I did my internal medicine training in Boston at all the Harvard hospitals. And I realized that general medicine in America had no nutrition involved. And when I went through my clinics, and I realized, oh, I need to do something even more specialized that may help me combine that knowledge. Long story short, I was debating between gastroenterology and immunology, because I thought those were the biggest nutritional effects on the body. This is before nutrition was sexy at all. Right. Nobody thought of it as an actual medical specialty. Everybody thought of it as this fun side thing. And frankly, it was thought to be quite unscientific to talk about food and lifestyle and it sounds so crazy now, but at that time, it was very unscientific.
Yeah.
So my rebuttal to that was to do immunology, allergy, because I thought, wow, the immune system has the most, you can modulate it through food and through the gut and the immune system. And what happened is I did all this amazing research at Columbia, and I got out and I started my practice, and day 3 into my practice, I had so many patients and absolutely zero time to talk about nutrition. Right. And so I was like, okay, there's something going on here. But I was like, happy. I met some really great doctors that I was working with, and, life happens. So you just keep going. But what happened is, and I know you can relate, Saya, I had my second child, and I was just downtrodden. I was moody. I was bloated. I would exercise like hours, but I felt like I was still bloated and gaining weight, and I felt brain fog, and I just felt like I had never been a mean or angry person, but I just felt like my emotions were just running out of control. So during that time,
I understand all that.
Yeah. And I was like, is this burnout, or is this post-baby, or is this something else? And I asked all my super smart OBGYN friends and my internal medicine friends and my women's health friends, and they all said, oh, you're getting older, you have a baby, you have 2 babies now. We checked all the blood markers, and everything seemed, within normal range or whatever. And so I was living my life, but I knew that there was something's got to give. So I had this one day I was rushing out of work, and my partner stopped me and said, hey, we need to meet, impromptu meeting at 5:00. And I was like, oh my God. And in my mind, I was thinking, oh, well, I can't say no, because they're going to think I'm not dedicated, and I can't, but I was supposed to go pick up my kids from karate. And all throughout the meeting, my mind is just rushing back and forth from like all the things I needed to do, rushing. And long story short, on the way to get my kids, I had a huge life-threatening car accident.
Oh, wow.
And I was going, it was almost like I didn't even care. Like I was driving so fast that I was like, I just need to be there. I have to be a good mom. And, of course, it was not intentional and nothing ever is, but it was almost like divine intervention. Like I needed that slowdown after that accident where I was literally injured. Thankfully, knock on wood, nothing more. There was no children in the car. The car was total. All the airbags went off. I had cuts and bruises, but I was intact. And that to me was my wake up call. And I'm like, I cannot live the next 50 years of my life feeling and living like this. I've got to make a change. And so I had a couple of days off to gather my thoughts, and I changed everything. I changed my diet. I changed my lifestyle. I started to write about nutrition, about health, and I started to go on my personal journey. And long story short, that was about 8 years ago.
Yeah. Well,
And so that's why I do wellness, and I do, my partners are so amazing, and they understand that this is a part of my clinical life that I needed to pursue. And so I see patients in the office, I see wellness patients online. I do a lot of education, social media. I'm writing my first book that's coming out in early 2021 called I'm So Effing
Tired. Wow. That's, I mean, I can't believe that happened to you. That's crazy, but I'm really happy that you're okay. And obviously that it caused so many positive changes in your life and your career. And obviously now you're a huge wealth of information for us and everyone watching, which is amazing. And so now you divide your practice between the two, correct?
Exactly.
Awesome. And so before we sort of start talking about intermittent fasting and the woman specifically, you are, of course, the intermittent fasting guru. Just for anyone who's not entirely familiar with intermittent fasting, what is like just a brief overview of what it is and how it works?
Yeah. Intermittent fasting is just simply taking a break from food. So if you think about it, every night you intermittent fast because you're not eating in your sleep. So you're naturally intermittent fasting. And when we look evolutionarily, we find that, people were fasting a lot. They would fast at night. Usually there was no light at night. And so usually after dinner, even if you had a campfire or something, you wouldn't eat late into the evening, and then you would take a break until morning, and probably you'd need time. There's no refrigerator, so in the morning you would need time before you eat breakfast. So intermittent fasting is a very natural technique that we've lost over the years. And so now modern Americans eat up to 16 hours a day, really just taking 8 hours break for sleep, a lot of them. And so intermittent fasting is just a break from food. You can still have water. And we say anywhere from 12 hours to 16 hours is considered an intermittent fast. You can go up to 24 hours. Some people even call, intermittent fasting longer fasts. But after about 24 hours, it's considered an extended fast. So that's intermittent fasting. So it can be as easy as just going to sleep and having no food, or maybe extending it a little bit, not eating before bed, or not eating right when you get up, and that would still be an intermittent fast.
And so when you're not fasting and when you're eating, I've heard that you're allowed to eat whatever you want. Is that true? Not true? Like, what's your opinion on that?
Okay. So the problem is the modern Western and American diet is crap, right? Obviously. And so anything that you do differently than that, if you are eating whole foods, and I don't mean the store, I mean like actual food that's not from a package, for 90% of your diet, then you are pretty much free to do whatever you want with that 10%. That's kind of the diet that I prescribe. Now, I do tell people that it's really difficult to do any kind of intermittent fasting if you're eating a high sugar, high refined carbohydrate diet. So if you follow the rule that I just said, like, 90% real whole foods, and 10% of the junk and the sugar and the carbs, and then you're good.
Yeah.
And so a lower glycemic index diet with high amounts of prebiotic vegetables is the ideal version. So in the beginning, it might just be, hey, I'm going to start intermittent fasting. And then you might say, hey, I'm going to actually take out a lot of the refined carbohydrates and sugars. And then you might say, oh, and I'm also going to add in 6 to 8 servings of prebiotic vegetables, and 2 liters of water. And that would be kind of what I would consider a ideal version. An ideal version is also primarily plant-based. Like I said, 90% would be the ideal situation.
The prebiotic vegetables that you mentioned, like what are some examples of those?
Okay, asparagus, garlic, onions, sunchokes, artichokes. Uh, you can, apple cider vinegar actually is a prebiotic food. So prebiotics, and we call these really high in prebiotics, but really any kind of plant fiber is really beneficial to our gut bacteria. So our gut bacteria, that's a separate issue, but I'll just tell you very briefly. The bacteria in our gut actually are the ones that are making these decisions in tandem with our own immune cells about what to do with each food item or toxic item that comes through our GI tract. And so if you're eating prebiotic fiber, you are feeding the army that's making all the decisions for you. So in this time of COVID, people should understand that it's not about just taking the vitamins. It's about growing that healthy gut bacteria and not killing it with antibiotics. And so you might want to up your vegetable fiber, decrease your toxins and your sugar, and really stay away from the antibiotics during this time. So that's basically the diet that I recommend.
Yeah, and I know there's like a lot more intricacies, and this is just like the quick version, but
yeah,
that's
exactly.
good to know because I had no idea what a prebiotic vegetable was, and now I have to order a lot of asparagus because I actually like asparagus.
Yeah, I mean, these are little changes to your life that can make such huge differences. If people just started to eat, if I try to eat 6 to 8 servings of vegetables a day, that means that I'm eating vegetables at pretty much every meal. And for me, that took a little bit of adjustment because, when I was at work, I wasn't eating any vegetables, but now I take cut carrots or cut, food or air fried broccoli or something with me so I can get those servings in.
Yeah, and now with a lot of people working from home, we have very little excuse to not get
Yes,
the vegetables in. Um,
absolutely.
and so it's interesting. I mean, I've looked into intermittent fasting a lot. I tried it briefly a few years ago, and I totally echo what you're saying. I really didn't have results until I was actually eating healthy during that time because I got some misinformation about like I could eat totally whatever I wanted,
Yeah.
eating horrible food and consuming alcohol, in like I was just eating a lot of bad stuff in the
Yeah.
designated eating time, and so I was like, oh, I'm not losing any weight. And it was
Yeah, I
fun.
know. It's like a misnomer. People always want to have their cake and eat it too. I feel like in our modern world, it's like we're always trying to look for the shortcut around, doing the work.
Yeah, no, definitely. So no, that's good to know. And what I really want to ask you about, which I think is so fascinating, and I just learned this through your Instagram the other day, which is why I want to talk to you about it, is the way we can intermittent fast. Women can intermittent fast to optimize for our own bodies by timing it with our menstrual cycle, which I had no idea this was even a thing. So before we get into intermittent fasting, along with the optimization for the menstrual cycle, can you just go over some of the basic phases of the menstrual cycle so everyone's on the same page?
Yeah. So, okay. So when we talk about the menstrual cycle, this is what happened to me. I read a article on one of these fitness sites by a nutritionist, and he had talked about how he trains his clients based on their menstrual cycle. And I was like, wait a second, that I've never even heard of that. And how he explained it was exactly how I do it now, which is that the week before your period, most people are quite tired. We're cortisol sensitive. Cortisol sensitive means sensitive to stress. So not only emotional stress, which makes you cry, but also physical stress. And so his name is Dr. Jade Tata, and what he had said is, hey, days 21 through 28, you should lay off on the heavy exercise. He would tell his athletes, female athletes, and he said, you guys should do more self-care, more yoga, more nature walks, and less of the stressful activities, and also eat more vegetables and nuts and seeds, and less of the sugary or even carbohydrates that you would eat in the first half of your cycle. So what that means is the menstrual cycle, day 1 is considered the day that you have your period. So that's day 1. Day 14, for, a lot of people don't have a 28-day cycle, but for those who do, then day 14 is day of ovulation. And from day 0, so day 1 through day 14, your hormones are rising in a way that estrogen is kind of the dominant hormone. Estrogen is a great hormone. It's almost thought of like a fire. It increases your metabolism. You're more able to tolerate carbohydrates and sugar, and you're more able to tolerate exercise. And so that's when you want to be eating more carbohydrates, exercising more, and fasting more. So it's like eat like an athlete, train like an athlete. That's when you really want to up your intermittent fasting. And then days 14 through 28, the latter half of your cycle, and especially those last 7 days. And Sai, and I know, if you're a woman, those last 7 days, what that does to you. So 21 through 28. And those last 7 days, you want to be really gentle with your body. You really want to cut down the intermittent fasting, or maybe not do any at all. You want to sleep more. You want to take nature walks. You want to do things that are very kind to your body. You just can't take the same stress. So when I start to adjust my fasting, my eating, and my exercise for my cycle, everything changed. And I could understand why these athletes did so well as well. And so I had Dr. Jay Tata on to discuss this. And he said, this is so crazy that men and women are considered like the same, even though we know that as women, our hormones rule our lives. Like from the moment you wake up, those days 21 through 28, you are dominated by your hormones, right? And the same thing, once you get your period, about day 2 or day 3, you get your energy back. You're like, I'm ready to go. And so when I started to do that for myself, I found significant benefits. And so I kind of started talking about it with some of my OBGYN friends and colleagues, and they said, oh, this is interesting. There's no studies on it. If it works for you, it works for you, that kind of thing. And so I started to talk about it with other people, and it was such an interesting thing. But I'll have to say, Sai, there's really no studies that kind of have a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial on training or eating or fasting during these times. This is based on the science, but it's not validated yet.
Yeah. So basically, it's anecdotal, which for anyone that's watching, that means that it's based off of case-by-case scenarios and people's experiences. And based off the physiology of what we know as scientists and as doctors, that it makes sense, right? It makes sense that we're going to be more sensitive during the time when we're more stressed, or our body is more, as you said, cortisol sensitive. Is that the
exactly cortisol sensitive? And I think that one thing you have to remember is that women's hormones are not well studied in general. When I looked up,
we know why that is, right?
Yeah. So when I looked up intermittent fasting and hormones, I scoured the literature. Okay. I was looking for any piece of evidence that it affects hormones or doesn't affect hormones. And guess what? Only thing we had is rat studies. And rat studies were showing that if you make female rats fast for 24 hours every other day, that it could lead to ovulatory cycles. And people took that and they ran with it and they said women should not intermittent fast. But that's like saying, if you go out and run a marathon on the first day, you may get injured. And so you shouldn't do it. Like running is bad. And so that's how I describe it to people. I say, one, there's no studies. Two, the studies that we have are on rats. Three, the rat studies are so poor because they're looking at very, very stressful situations. And we know as women, we are wired to turn off ovulation in immense amounts of stress, either famine or some physical changes that our body cannot feasibly carry a fetus. And so stress, as you know, is a huge, huge problem with hormones and ovulation. So, but it's pretty safe for most people, as long as you treat it like an exercise or running, where you take your time and train properly.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are obviously cases where, especially in young women, we see that if they're exercising excessively and not eating, then they can go anovulatory, which means, again, for anyone who doesn't know what that means the egg is not releasing from the ovary, and you could, miss a period. And so we always say, if you're missing periods, and this is a little, sidebar, but if you're missing periods, you need to talk to your doctor about it. And, obviously, anytime you're starting any kind of new diet, discuss it with your physician. So Amy, just to sort of backtrack just a bit, because I know we're going to be a little short on time coming up, but so if we're going to manage intermittent fasting according to our cycle, then that means we could probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, we could fast for longer periods during the first 14 days and then maybe fast for shorter periods during the latter half, or should we not be fasting at all during the latter half?
So it depends on your baseline. So if it's kind of, what you're accustomed to. So whatever aggressive fasting means to you, you should do it in the first 14 days. So for me, that means that 3 days a week, I do 12 to 14 hours, something easy. And then 3 days a week, I push it to 12 to 18 hours. 14 to 18 hours. So on average, 16 hours. And then 1 day off completely.
Okay.
And so, but then the week before my period, so days 21 through 28, and really the latter half of my cycle, I take it easier, meaning that I don't, sometimes I'll just do 12 hours and some days I won't fast at all, but I never really go to that 16, 18 mark during my last week. So that's what it means to me, but that could mean something completely different. So if you're just starting out with fasting and you just tried your first 12-hour fast, then during that days 21 through 28, you might want to take a complete break.
All right, no, that makes total sense. So this is like obviously very enlightening discussion. I personally am probably going to try to get back into intermittent fasting since I'm, as you know, postpartum, and probably going to use it as a way to try to get those last few pounds off once I stop breastfeeding. Any final tips on, just on what we talked about for anyone watching?
Yeah, I think that the big thing for women to understand is that we have a clock in every one of our cells. It's not just in our brain. And so by intermittent fasting, you are optimizing the clock in all the cells in your body. So they found that actually people's skin is better when they intermittent fast, or meaning that they restrict the time that they eat. So they might stop eating 3 hours before bed. So basically the type of intermittent fasting that I recommend, circadian fasting, will be better for the skin, for the liver, for muscle tissue. So we're not just talking about weight loss here. We're talking about overall health and disease and long-term health.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. And, I know you have so much more to offer in terms of this, and I know you actually have a guided program for anyone who's interested in intermittent fasting. Where can people find the guided program, and where can they find you online to learn more about all this?
Sure. So you can, Fasting MD is where I hang out on Instagram at Fasting MD. On my website is amymdwellness.com. And there's information on my guided program, upcoming things that I'm participating in, and all of that. You can be on my newsletter, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all this information. I know I learned a ton, and I'm sure everyone watching learned a ton of information. And thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you so much, Saya.